You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to Filmmaking Conversations with me, Damien Swaby, and I have an incredible guest on the show today. Geoffrey D. Calhoun is the host of the Successful Screenwriter podcast. This podcast discusses what it takes to make it in the industry, and we had a great discussion. This episode's a must for anyone getting into screenwriting, or anyone like myself who's written scripts but they're not quite where they need to be or where they could be. And Geoffrey, how are you today?
Oh, doing really well. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for coming on. You know, I'm always interested in speaking to screenwriters and people who are knowledgeable about the craft and art. I mean, I've tried to write many a screenplay. Maybe I should have spoken to you a few years ago. And yeah, so it's great to have you on. I mean, your podcast especially, what I like about it is a lot of people, it takes a while for them to get going in podcasting. It starts off one way, but it ends up being a lot better down the line, or it improves or it changes. But your podcast, what I like about it, as soon as I, downloaded a couple of episodes and whatever, I was like, wow, you've just like naturally come into it and it's so good.
Oh, well, thank you. That's so kind. I really appreciate that. As an introvert, it was difficult to get into the podcasting thing. But I had a lot of people along the way kind of help me come out of my shell.
Okay, so firstly, how did you become a screenwriter, and what is your story behind getting into it all?
Oh yeah, sure. That was actually a bet about over 15 years ago. I was working with a guy who was editing a local kids show, and he wanted to get into screenwriting, so he had an open bet on anybody that could write a better screenplay than him. I'm a little competitive. I said, I'll do it, and so that got me into it. I wrote the screenplay, and it's your first screenplay. They're never good. But I had left it in the kitchen table and found my wife reading it. And she really thought, there was something there. And I had confessed to her that I really enjoyed the process. So I just kind of kept doing it, and it's just become my life's work.
When did you start the first one that your wife led?
Started? Oh, geez. Well, let's see. It was early 2000s. I want to say 2003-ish, maybe 2005.
And what was the script about?
That script? Oh, goodness. It was actually a really interesting concept. So it was about the archangels are reincarnated on Earth to stop the upcoming apocalypse, and they are in a heated battle with the four horsemen of the apocalypse that are also reincarnated on Earth. And so the whole catch was that the archangels, their jobs in heaven were reflected in their responsibilities on Earth, and the same with the four horsemen. So Michael was a burned out Detroit cop, and Pestilence was a drug dealer, and so it kind of played out that way.
So you basically had a small story and you weren't very creative.
That's a joke.
I went big, man. I always swing for it. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but it was fun.
That's great, because I kind of thought you as a first-time writer, you may have thought to yourself, okay, well, there was a husband and wife, and they got divorced, and you kind of blah, 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 but you just kind of said, sod that, I'm bringing in all kinds of crazy stuff, which is great. It shows your level of ambition, and you didn't restrict yourself to a minimal type of way of thinking. But have you had any scripts that have turned into any films we might have watched or we might be able to see?
Yeah, so I work as a screenwriting consultant, script doctor, a rewriter. I do write for hire, so I do all of it, and I get brought on to commission. So I actually have a documentary that I did consulting on this year that is actually now on Amazon, called Sasquatch Amongst Wild Men. So I did a consulting on that, and then I actually I have a writer's credit along with the amazing documentarian Darcy Weir, called Crop Circle Realities. That's a documentary that'll be coming out in March. And he wrote it, then he brought me on, and I got to do a write on it as well. And actually got to voice it, which was kind of cool.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which was a surprise because he liked the podcast and he said, "Hey, why don't you try voicing this?" And I was like, "Sure, I'm game for anything." So, so Crop Circle Realities comes out in March, and that one will actually have a pretty wide distribution, from what I understand. It'll even be on cable channels. So,
Channels will that one be on?
so I think locally we call it Xfinity or Comcast.
Oh, Comcast.
Yeah, but I think it'll have pretty good distribution. So I have that, and I've worked on a rewriter on several scripts that have gone into production. I was recently hired to write the true life story of a local woman who whose husband tried to kill her and her family, and then she escaped with her kids, and then he hired an assassin from prison.
Whoa.
And so I wrote that script, and that will actually be shooting. Well, it was supposed to be shooting right now, actually, because of COVID, that's been pushed back. But that's still on the slate, so that's going to happen pretty soon.
The first documentary you mentioned, Sasquatch, is that the name? Sorry.
Yeah, Sasquatch Among Wild Men. It's actually really cool.
And what's that one about?
Yeah, so it covers different Sasquatches, or what they call cryptids, from around the world, and looks at them not as just like one type of species, but as potentially different types of species. And I was very skeptical coming into this stuff, but they have really interesting research that Darcy does, and he starts making you really question, okay, yeah, maybe there's something here. And they really explore that with the documentary, and I was really enjoyed being part of the process.
Oh, that's great. I mean, being a part of that type of process is quite different from what my understanding than doing a narrative screenplay. So you able to tell us the difference between writing for a documentary and writing for a narrative film?
Oh, Damien, there's an absolute difference. Just even in structuring it or even formatting it. It's really interesting you say that, because I wrote a formatting class for the IFH Academy.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, and on there I cover the differences between formatting for a documentary and formatting for a feature. Because when you're formatting for a documentary, you're actually creating the scenes themselves in 3 different columns between visual, audio, and narrative. Yeah, so it's a whole different approach, and it's a lot of fun. I really, I just enjoy working on stuff and furthering my skill as a writer.
So is there a documentary in particular that we may have all seen or is very popular that you can say has been written very well?
Oh, geez. I mean, I think the Vow on HBO is amazing.
Okay, what's that one about?
Well, that one's about the Nexium cult that blew up real big last year, and their leader just got imprisoned for sex trafficking.
Oh, I definitely have to look into that one. That sounds
It's
really
on HBO,
good.
I believe.
Okay, I think I've got the HBO app, so I'll definitely look into that one. But in terms of, I'll give an example then. As far as I'm aware, the most successful documentaries are two of Michael Moore's documentaries. I mean, would you say they're written particularly well, or do they go against the grain?
Bowling for Columbine
It is.
and Fahrenheit. Yeah, those are good. I think the key to documentary is expressing what you want to say to the audience in a compelling way, and through doing the research, but also by making your subject approachable, relatable, so that they're personally involved in it. And then if you could put just a little bit of mystery on there that you slowly unravel throughout the doc, it really it hooks people.
But as well, I was listening to one episode of your podcast, and you're a part of the Script University, or is it the Screen? And tell us about your work there and what exactly do you do? Because I haven't actually heard of such a university before. Like we have film schools in London, but from your conversation and your podcast about it, it sounded like quite an exciting place to be if you want to get into screenwriting.
Well, I got it. One, thank you for listening to the podcast. I appreciate that support. So the Script University is actually run by Reader's Digest.
Oh,
So pretty big. And Script University is an online screenwriting university where they bring on, I mean, basically masters from the craft. So I mean, you've got the godfather of formatting himself, Dave Trottier, teaching a formatting class. That's huge to be able to get somebody like that. And then you just have all kinds of individuals, directors and writers that are coming on that are known, teaching of their expertise, that you can go on there and sign up one of their courses. My course is advanced rewriting. So if you come onto my course, you actually start out with a screenplay. And then I take you through how to rewrite it section by section. And then you actually get notes from me of where the script can go, where its strengths are, what its weaknesses are, and how to solve inherent issues you have with the script. So I'm actually very active in the process. I always get great feedback from my students. My students are like, I wish I had you around 5 years ago. So it's always nice to hear things like that.
so your students, when they say, I wish I had you around 5 years ago, typically what type of mistakes are they making, or people in general, when you read their scripts?
Mostly what I find are scripts they're a great idea that lacks direction. And so what will happen is my students will have spent years seeking advice from people that may not have been able to lead them in the right way. Or they'll bring on multiple writers. So you get 4 or 5 different voices on one script, which then, of course, makes the script a mess. So I come in and it's about, this is how you cut away the fat. This is how you get to the meat on the bone, and really make this script shine. And I lead them from the process of the rewrites, all the way from rewriting your characters to rewriting plot to even the nitty gritty of like how to form a scene to make it powerful, or even how to rework the action blocks, the written description within the scene to make that catch a writer's eye. So I'm like, I really take you through the process.
And is this an online course, or do they go into a building, a college, university, and sit down with you?
No, it's all online. So, I have writers from around the world come on and sign up for the course, and which is perfect really for COVID. So they go online. They go through my course that I've created. I've created an entire 6-week course that they go through week by week. They submit their script. I read their scripts. I give them feedback, and then they interact with me right there on the school's chat channel, basically, like their comment section. And it's very lovely.
That does sound lovely, and I'm glad it's online in that way, because you can be in Tokyo, London, or wherever and take a part in this, which is just brilliant. You're not selecting just one part of the world. But with your scripts, for example, you're a writer and you've got a long history in writing scripts for documentaries and narrative work. Who do you go to when you think you may have a problem with one of your own scripts?
Yeah, that's great. I do documentaries. I do features. I've worked on web series TV. So as far as what my skill can goes, pretty diverse. Now, who I go to, everybody's got to have their bestie. They got to have that person they can call up and be like, and just unload on them. So mine is this very talented screenwriter by the name of Joanne Hess. And I really respect her voice and her skill as a writer, and the fact that she doesn't pull punches when I go to her and say I have an issue, because you don't want a yes man or a yes person, because that doesn't help you grow as a writer, and it actually sets you up for failure. It's nice to have someone that supports you when you're down, but you also got to have that person that tells you, look, this is what's going on, and then doesn't just tell you that, but then also helps you solve the problem. And she's been there for me. Any moment of any day I can call her, and I have. And I like to think that I'm that way for her as well.
So what type of advice, give us an example, sorry, of advice or constructive criticism that she's given you on a script?
Oh, let's see. So I wrote a script. Well, you know what? I'm going to take it to my book if you don't mind, Damien.
Oh, of course not. Go for it. I was going to ask you about the book, so go for it.
Well, because she was one of the first people I went to, and that's what pops into my head, and I don't want to sit here and kind of guess around. So I sent my book, the first draft of my book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, to her. I sent it to her, and I sent it to Emmy award-winning director Kelly Schwartz. So Kelly Schwartz and Joanne they got the first 2 copies of my book. And and then I just sweated for like a week, waiting to find out, because I sent it to him. I said, look, I think there's something here, but I don't know, it could just be garbage, and I need you to tell me. Right. And so Kelly read it on set while he was filming a film, and ended up using the book while he was filming it. That's how much he liked it. Joanne,
that's amazing.
Yeah, that blew my mind. Joanne read the book. She calls me up, and she gives me pointers on, okay, here's what you can tweak. But she said, other than that, you've got something. And I was like blown away. I was like, okay, if she likes it, then I know there's something good here, because she would tell me, and because your success, they're invested in it, and so they're not going to let you fail. So yeah, she went through, and she's just, this is what works, this is what doesn't, here's ways to tweak it, and says it to me in a very in a supportive way. But yeah, that constructive criticism that you need. And I was just like, wow, okay, so we got something here. And I put it out, and it became a bestseller.
And that's a real friend you've got there, that's for sure. And it sounds like when someone actually uses your book, like they say, I've used your book, that must be a great feeling. I mean, well done, good on you. And what inspired you to make that book? How did you sit down and think, this is the book I need to write?
It's funny you asked that, because I was looking for it, to be honest with you.
Oh.
I wanted to read that book. I didn't want to write it. And I looked everywhere for it. I couldn't find it. It didn't exist. And so, I mean, it's a reference guide on screenwriting that covers every aspect of screenwriting, from concept development all the way through marketing your script and building your brand as a writer. Covers everything. You don't have that in the screenwriting book world. Everything is specialized, so there's always one little aspect of a book, like a book on concept design and a book on selling your script, but there isn't a book that covers everything, especially in a reference guide way that is easy to follow or read. And I'm kind of frustrated by that. And I had been teaching these seminars on screenwriting. People would come up to me, ask me if I wrote a book, and I hadn't written one. And I figured, well, this book doesn't exist, I might as well birth it into existence. And so then I wrote it, and I went to like the biggest publisher for screenwriting books that exists. And I said, hey, do you guys, want to consider reading a draft of this? Because I think there's a market for it. And they said, oh, no, there's no market for it. And I said, I think you're wrong, because I am the market. I think I know. And he goes, and they go, no. I said, okay, that's fine. And so then I put the book out there. I became known as like the subplot guy, because I developed a structure for subplots that didn't exist really. And so I put that into the book as well, put it out there. And yeah, I mean, it's got like 85-star reviews on Amazon or something. I mean, it's people like it. It's taught in a university in California. And it kind of blows my mind when, because I've gotten phone calls from people that say, my son failed a screenwriting class, but now after reading your book, he understands it. Like that stuff just kind of it blows my mind, and at the same time it doesn't land, because I'm just like still in shock, because I'm used to being the guy reading the books. Like I still read screenwriting books from people, and not used to being the guy that actually is looked at like that. So
A publisher that said there's no market for this. Have you gone back to them and said, haha?
well, see, I'm competitive, right? So
Yeah.
as soon as you tell me there's no market for this, I want to prove you wrong. So as soon as they said, like, well, there's no market for this, I said, well, now I have to make it a bestseller. Like, I don't have a choice, because I know this book is there. So no, I never went back to him. One, because after self-publishing, but self-publishing successfully, because you have to be careful with that. Self-publishing, you can get into trouble if you end up going with an indie publisher that's predatory. So I just self-published it all, and was getting some revenue from it. I found these publishers that if you go to with these books, you really don't see any money from it. So it's not even really in my interest to go back to them with it as a bestseller, telling them, like, look, do you want to take it now? Because I know the revenue I get from it would be significantly less. So I would probably get more exposure with the book. They would probably have it in more bookstores than I have it in now. But in the end, I would probably see less return.
Good idea. I completely understand what you mean there. But when I think of self-publishing, how do you market it? I mean, how much time do you spend on marketing it and getting it out there for people to know about?
Well, it's like podcasting, right? So it becomes just like a chunk of your life goes towards the book. A chunk of your life goes towards the podcast. And it's just about, how do I balance my life around these things? So when the book was coming out, I mean, I was marketing it like crazy. And I'm not Facebook boosts or anything, but I would post about it. I would present it to the community that I'm part of, especially with Script Summit, which is a festival that I run. I present it to that community. They would like it, so they would spread it out, market it on other Facebook groups or any other social media can, and then find a publisher that can work with you on budget, but also believes in the project.
Good.
And so doing that, we were able to make it a bestseller, which is pretty amazing. And then I found out that the book was listed as number 9 on the top 88 screenwriting books of all time.
Wow. Well done. That's amazing.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool.
That is, and because, wow, because when I, looked into screenwriting before, even in my local library, there was like so many books about screenwriting. And then I went online and there was even more books. And then I went into Waterstones and there was even more books. So it was like, you're kind of standing there and you're like, where do I start? How do I know which one's worth buying, or which one's best, or which one is too confusing? Or, there's all these different theories, the hero's journey and all of this stuff. And you're like, well, so for yours to be number 9 is such a good thing, because that means a whole community of people have decided this book, excuse my French, is the shit. We need to have it.
Yeah, it was on this site called Book Authority, and the Book Authority, they weigh every book that's been released, and then they tally it up by how it's done, and there you go. So it's like an independent thing,
And is it an audio book as well?
Oh yeah, so it's on all formats. So it's audio, it's digital, and then it's paperback.
The book itself, how long would it have taken you to have put it all together and get it out there?
How long did it take? Oh, I don't know. Like 9 months or something.
That's amazing. I can certainly see how you would be happy with the results of that. And when people have used this book, have they gone on to other podcasts, or have they gone on to tell people that we may have known to get this book, or have they been associated with any screenplays we may have heard of?
I have no idea, man. Because I just random people around the world read the book. So I got comments the other day from somebody in like I want to say like India and Norway. Like I don't know. I hope it leads to somebody writing something that really helps them find success. I mean, that's the goal of the book. So yeah. I mean,
Amazing.
I know Kelly Shores was reading it while he was making Abigail Haunting, and Abigail Haunting came out on Amazon, did pretty good. But he had already written the book, the script and stuff at that point. So him reading the book, I don't know. I don't think it probably influenced the film at all.
How did you get into podcasting? What was the aim there, and how did that all get started out?
Well, it's just about trying to be a champion or a warrior for the indie screenwriter and create avenues for success that I feel can help people. And so creating the podcast, I wanted to interview professionals and people that have made it and to show how they found success, right? So that's why it's called The Successful Screenwriter, because it's, I interview people that have made it. This is how they found success. Maybe you could find it that way as well. And I think that's kind of the uniqueness of the podcast. And mostly it's me learning.
Yeah.
Because I'm a student and I get really geeky about this stuff. Like I feel I'm the forever student. So I'm sitting here, I'm questioning people just like you're doing. And it's because I want to learn what their secrets are and put that in my toolbox.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that people are listening to it is just a bonus, because I'd be asking those people that question anyway.
I get your point, and I completely can relate to you on that way as well, one podcast to another. And the podcast itself is part of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast Network. It started as part of the network, am I right?
Yeah, I had a different podcast, and I had been chatting with Alex, and my podcast I had was okay. It was it was doing well enough that he was like, hey, why don't you come onto the network? And I was like, absolutely. I mean, it's Alex Ferrari, the guy's a legend.
Yeah, he's a podcasting.
The answer is yeah. It was funny because he was asking like, hey, he's pitching me the podcast network, and I'm like, you had me at hello, Alex. I mean, absolutely. So yeah, he came on, and then he mentored the podcast and how to really kind of direct it into what it needs to be, and brand it accordingly. And so I mean, the guy's he's just a master of what he does. And when you're in a room with him, just sit back and listen, because the guy's going to drop gold left and right. And so that's what I did. I mean, he's really essential in getting this podcast to becoming what it is.
I completely agree again and relate. He, very inspiring figure as well, in terms of filmmaking and the podcast world, certainly. And the guest you've had on, is there any guest in particular that you could tell us about that we should definitely go to and listen to? Or do you have 2 or 3 gold podcast episodes?
Yeah. So Dave Trottier from the Screenwriter's Bible. I mean, that was one of the first books I'd ever read on screenwriting that I loved. Because I'd read a lot of books of screenwriting, and some of them you read, you're like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Or you read another one and like, this guy is really good, but he doesn't know how to teach it. I find that in a lot of books. But Dave Trottier, he understands how to teach screenwriting and formatting in a way that makes sense. So I read his book and loved it. I mean, and I read it forever ago. And he's doing his thing still. So I thought, okay, I got this podcast. It's doing kind of okay. People like it. It's been, my podcast has been #1 internationally, which threw me off. That was a big surprise. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna swing big here. So I pitched it to Dave, and he's like, yeah, come on. I was like, oh my God. So I got him on the podcast, and then it was like 5 minutes before the podcast. I was nervous. I was sweating. And normally I'm pretty cool, So then it came to like me having him on the podcast and just not fanboying in front of him. Just be cool. Like I kept thinking that to myself. So I had him on. I had on Kevin Sorbo, and that was another one where you're like, okay, just be cool, because I mean I grew up watching Hercules, the legendary journeys, and so just to be staring at Kevin Sorbo and asking him questions was throwing me off. But man, I don't know. I get lucky. I get a lot of really cool guests coming on. I've got a guest that came on, and I'll be posting his episode within the week, and it's Geoffrey D, the guy who wrote Final Destination.
Wow, you're getting some great guests.
Oh man, I'm just so thankful. Yeah, I've got a great community, and they helped me reach out. And because I don't know, so I got to talk with him, and he's such a great guy, and it was cool to kind of pick his brain on creating something like that and finding originality. So.
Well, what I will say is the show Hercules, I had completely forgotten about it, if I'm honest, because it didn't get maybe the longest run in the UK. But listening to your podcast yesterday with Jeff Colbo, it completely brought it back to me. And I really don't think you geeked out or became a fanboy. It was a really good interview. So well done on that one.
Oh yeah, Kevin's he was really nice, man. I mean, he's just a normal guy. He's talking to him, and then it's just about gearing the podcast towards mining as much as I can out of the guests, and he was very willing to do that, which was awesome.
That was good. I found it interesting when he said about his choices that he wants to make, and that was very interesting. It's like especially considering the current climate we're in. I thought, it's a very interesting guy. And how did you reach out to him? Do you just email or friend of a friend or social media?
I will do whatever I can, Damien. So I will email. I'll email their managers. I'll go on LinkedIn. I'll go on, wherever I think I can get access to someone and not be labeled stalker. So I'll do that. And
you won't knock on their door.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. Not yet. So that's what I'll do.
If someone's listened to your cast and they've read your book and they're a scriptwriter themselves, but they're not quite sure about the state of it, even after all of your help, is there a way they can contact you and potentially hire you? I mean, how does the process work? What do you expect? A synopsis, a treatment?
Oh, it's a great question. I actually set up a free 15-minute consultation. So if people want to, I booked off a couple of like a couple of hours on a couple of days a week. So if people want to reach out, because I believe in community outreach. So if people want to reach out, they go on wefixyourscript.com, and then there's a free 15-minute session you can have with me where we'll sit down for a couple minutes on Zoom and we'll just chat. And then you can learn about me, what I do. You can learn about how we help people, or I'll just answer a few of your questions and then you sign off and that's it. And that's fine as well. It's a no commitment thing. And I've had people from Korea, South Korea to Peru hop on and take advantage of that.
In a sense, I could be wrong, but it sounds like professionally, at least, you could live anywhere.
Yeah. No, you don't have to be in LA.
No, yeah, you could be anywhere. I mean, so you live in LA, is that right?
I'm actually in Detroit. Okay. I've gone down to LA several times, come back. Not to live there, but I'll visit down there and come back. So I mean, I can go anywhere if I needed to. If someone said, "Oh, I want to have a big meeting with you, can you come down?" Then we can arrange that. I've been invited to Ghana. I've been invited to the Czech Republic. I've been invited to Norway. I've been to London. I love your city.
Oh, great. What part of London did you go to?
So I was in Canning Town. Does that?
Yep, Canning Town. I know Canning Town. Yeah.
I was in Canning Town, and I just gotta say, your tube system is so confusing.
It's so funny.
I'm dyslexic, and so I go, before I'd go on the tube, I talk to the poor guy in the booth every day and be like, I just need you to tell me exactly where to go. And he was so sweet. He would tell me exactly where to go, and he'd laugh, and then I get on the tube and no one talks. It's crazy.
No one talks to each other. No.
So I would be the ugly American, and I would just start chatting up the person next to me, and they'd crack up, and they'd be like, "You're American?" I'd be like, "Absolutely." I can't stand the fact no one's talking. So I'd just sit there and talk.
So in the tube system in or London, or the underground system in Detroit, people would talk, or
We don't have an underground system.
oh, because I used it in New York, and I was just like, this is the most confusing thing of my life. I got lost. Like
In Detroit, we're known as the Motor City, right? So it's all cars. So everybody has a car. Everybody drives everywhere. So yeah, we have a bus system, you know, and you have weirdos on the bus, just like you have weirdos on the tube system.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there is no underground transport here.
oh, I see. So it's the underground in America. Is it only kind of New York, I guess, then, or
Big cities. Yeah.
Chicago or
I don't know. See, I've been to Chicago, but I don't remember ever seeing if they have one, because I usually just walked everywhere, because Chicago's not that huge when you're down.
I see.
Yeah.
so if someone wanted to extend 15 minutes with you, if they wanted to maybe have a consultation after the first draft, how does that work? Is it like a set amount of hours, a set amount of drafts?
Yeah, we have a few things if we're going to get into services. So you can do a development session with me, which is an hour. Or one thing I recommend is our mentoring package, where I will mentor you as a student. And the way I do it, I actually like the way I do it, because other services will lock you in for an ungodly amount of money for like 3 months. But for me, it's 4 sessions. So whatever you need, it could be a month, it could be 2 months. That's how we do our mentoring package.
And in Detroit, what is the filmmaking scene like? Like, if you've written a brilliant script and a filmmaker is interested in buying it, or you're mentoring a filmmaker in Detroit itself, is that a place where independent film can thrive?
Yeah, we used to have a much bigger independent community, because we had tax incentives, and those kind of disappeared about 4 or 5 years ago. But the filmmaking community never went away. I'd just say that it tightened. But there are people here making movies. There's indie filmmakers that are making movies. You can become part of the community. One of the biggest communities we have here is the Royal Star Film Festival. They're probably one of the largest communities here, and they before coronavirus were holding monthly meetups where hundreds and hundreds of people would come in the filmmaking community and gather together. And I was so impressed that we actually partnered with them on my film festival, my screenplay contest. So Script Summit, my screenplay contest, partnered with the Royal Star Film Festival for our contest to allow our writers who submit to have access to the films that they display.
Excellent. That's really cool. That must mean a lot to a lot of those artists too. But why did the tax incentives go? How does that work? Because I've heard of tax incentives. And
we got a new governor who could come in and got rid of the tax incentive. And that governor has since gone, and we have a new governor now who's running the show. And I know that there are people trying to actively lobby towards bringing the incentives back. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, well, I hope they come back if it can help a thriving independent film community. You know, it's the best for all of us, in my opinion. Even though I'm not there, you know, I'd still love to see what comes out of Detroit, the same way I love to see what comes out of Vancouver, Chicago, New York, Paris, wherever. As long as it's good, I want to see it. That's my thing. And lastly, what is next? What can we see from you next? I mean, you've written one book. Is there another book potentially going to happen? Are we going to see?
I'm actually working on a second edition for the book, the Guide for Every Screenwriter. And the second edition will include television. So it will not just be feature oriented, it will be television. I think that's going to be pretty huge.
Talking of television in that way, a lot of good stuff, just my opinion and maybe a few others, we're seeing some of the better stories told on television rather than the cinema at the moment, the theaters, as you guys would say in America. Yeah. So how do you feel about that difference between writing maybe a long Netflix series that's doing well, or HBO have had brilliant series in the past, compared to what we're seeing on feature films in theaters now?
Yeah, I think we're hitting into like the golden or silver age of television. So you're seeing a lot bigger budgets. You're seeing a lot more shows coming out. Shows are a little bit more risky as well, which is great. So you have some shows pushing boundaries. The other issue, though, is they're two different things. Writers tend to say, "Oh, I'm going to just go write a TV pilot, or go work on a show," and they don't understand that it's a different form of storytelling.
Yeah.
So you can't just leap into writing television. And I try and express that to students. If you're going to write television, you don't write a TV pilot first. That's not what you do. You develop a show, and then you write the pilot. That's the way it should be. So you get people that just kind of rush into doing a pilot. They're doing it backwards because inevitably that pilot will be useless. So writing a feature is a shorter narrative. So I actually find that television, being that long form narrative, is really more of an advanced type of screenwriting.
I see. Okay.
And is there any particular shows that you would highlight and say are really good ones? I mean, off the top of my head, one I particularly like right now is Queen's Gambit. But I like that maybe more because I'm really impressed by the cinematography. But is there anything you would say stands out in the history of television?
I think Queen's Gambit's great. It's as a limited series, it's good. I don't know how you would build that world out anymore beyond a season one.
Okay.
I think Stranger Things is fantastic. I really enjoyed Game of Thrones. I thought it was amazing filmmaking. Yes, the last season got rushed. But if you look at that body of work, that was a really strong show.
Okay.
So I think things like that, where you can really build in that long form narrative. Right now, I'm in love with The Boys on Amazon. I can't get enough of that show. Just fantastic.
And what about comedy? Is there any comedy shows you like? 'Cause I know I'm no writer, but comedy and drama, there's huge differences there. Any comedies that you could say stand out and potential writers could look at, for example, of how to do good comedy shows?
Yeah. I think The Orville is a really interesting comedy because it's a sci-fi comedy. You don't see much of that works, and it really does. And what is the other? There's another one that, oh, my mind is blanking.
Happened.
Yeah. It's I'm sorry, I lost it.
There's a sci-fi comedy from the UK. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's not running anymore, called Red Dwarf, and that was really, really popular
Popular,
here.
I saw the pilot.
Oh, the American pilot, did you see?
Yeah.
It's so ironic. I watched that for the first time yesterday. And growing up watching the UK version, it's so completely different. It's so like the lead character is not like that. I can't say if it's bad or worse because it's clearly designed for a different market, in my opinion. But if you catch maybe some of the second or third series, where I think that's the series where Red Dwarf really works, and there's certain elements of it that are very British, in my opinion. So I can see why
British humor is different from American, for sure. Yeah.
So I can see how they may have thought, no, we have to change this a bit for an American audience. But what did you think of that pilot episode of Red Dwarf? It was trash. Your ears and eyes bled.
That was it. Yeah, I didn't keep watching, if that tells you anything. There's an Amazon show that just came out. I think it's called Utopia or Dystopia, and it's based off of a UK show. And I actually want to try and see if I could find the original UK show. And I'm not able to find it for some reason. So I don't think they've released it onto any kind of streaming that I can get access to. Because I like to kind of get into the origin, like the girl with the dragon tattoo. When I watched that film, the American version, I was okay, where's the original? I watched the original. It's like far different. And it's interesting to see how they narratively change those based on market.
I see. I must watch the original myself. I haven't, but I definitely want to get around to it. But Geoffrey, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and taking your time. But remind us again, where can we find your book?
You can find my book on Amazon, or anywhere really. It's got distribution everywhere. I think even Walmart sells it online. So it could be Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You could find a breakdown of it on my website at wefixyourscript.com. So it's very easy to find.
Excellent. And I'll be putting those details in the show notes. So anybody who's interested, to check out the show notes, check out Geoffrey's website and all the links to the book and his social media handles. You'll learn a lot, and he's a great guy to follow. Have you thought of upgrading your cinematography game? Would you like to have an ASC cinematographer mentor you for free? Well, join one who has worked for Disney, Pixar, FX Networks, Netflix, and American Horror Story, as he teaches you how to create beautiful images using 3 lighting techniques he has mastered on film sets for over 30 years in the film industry. Each technique